Let's dive into the thrilling world of continuous threat exposure management, CTEM, shall we? CTEM, in its infinite wisdom, is not just a fancy tool or a magical technology wand you can wave to make all the bad cyber gremlins go away. No, it's a convoluted 5-step program that includes scoping, discovery, prioritization, validation, and mobilization. Because why make things simple when you can turn them into a bureaucratic nightmare? Now, let's talk about the tools and technologies that make CTEM tick. We've got CAASM, Cyber Asset Attack Surface Management, EASM, External Attack Surface Management, EM, Exposure Management, and RSAS, Red Team Automation Systems. These acronyms sound like something out of a dystopian sci-fi novel, don't they? They're crucial for peeking into every nook and cranny of your organization's digital environment, including that forgotten server from 2003 that everyone's too scared to touch. Moving on to the methodology, which is as straightforward as assembling IKEA furniture without the manual. First, we have scoping, where you pretend to know what you're doing by defining the initial exposure scope. Then there's discovery, where you play digital detective and hunt for vulnerabilities. Prioritization is next, where you decide which digital fires to put out first. Validation is like checking your work to make sure you didn't just make everything worse. And finally, mobilization, where you rally the troops and hope for the best. As for best practices, let's start with stakeholder engagement. Because nothing gets the blood pumping like a good old meeting with legal, compliance, and IT to discuss cybersecurity. Don't forget to regularly update your systems, because hackers totally adhere to a schedule and will wait patiently for you to patch things up. An incident response plan is also key, because when things inevitably go south, you'll need a plan to pretend like you had everything under control all along. Lastly, continuous improvement is crucial. After all, the only constant in cybersecurity is that you're always one step behind the latest threat. So there you have it, folks. CTEM in all its glory. A strategy so complex, it makes rocket science look like child's play. But hey, at least we're all having fun, right? Right? Introduction. Continuous Threat Exposure Management, CTEM, is a cybersecurity strategy that focuses on identifying, assessing, and mitigating risks within an organization's digital environment through continuous monitoring and enhancement of security posture. CTEM is not a single tool or technology but a set of processes and capabilities that involve a 5-step program or framework, which includes scoping, discovery, prioritization, validation, and mobilization. CTEM is a proactive and continuous approach that differs from traditional vulnerability management by being proactive rather than reactive, focusing on a wide range of threats, incorporating existing security measures, and utilizing advanced simulation tools for validation. Tools and technologies. CTEM leverages a variety of tools and technologies to support its implementation and improvement. These tools aid in the discovery, assessment, prioritization, validation, and mobilization stages of the threat management cycle. Key tools and technologies include Cyber Asset Attack Surface Management, External Attack Surface Management, Exposure Management, Red Team Automation Systems. These tools provide visibility into network segments, security controls, threat types, and tactics, techniques, and are crucial for identifying and analyzing an organization's attack surface, which includes external, internal, and cloud environment. Methodology. The 5 stages of the CTEM program are: scoping, defining the initial exposure scope, considering business-critical assets, and taking an adversarial approach rather than just focusing on known vulnerabilities. Discovery, actively seeking out and identifying potential vulnerabilities using tools like automated scanners, manual testing, and penetration testing. Prioritization, focusing on the most significant threats that could impact the business and prioritizing remediation efforts accordingly. Validation, assessing the effectiveness of remediation operations and ensuring that vulnerabilities are properly addressed. Mobilization, operationalizing the CTEM findings and defining communication standards and documented cross-team workflows. Best practices. Best practices for prioritizing threats during CTEM implementation include: Stakeholder engagement. Engage with various stakeholders, including IT, legal, compliance, and business units, to understand their specific requirements and concerns. Regular updates. Establish a regular schedule for updates and patches to strengthen the network against current known threats and preemptively address potential future threats. Incident response plan. Design an effective incident response plan to promptly respond to threats. The plan should be kept updated in line with emerging threats. Optimized risk mitigation processes. Ensure all existing risk mitigation processes are optimized and scalable. This will help manage the increased data feed demand between systems after a CTEM program is implemented. Use of AI. Use an AI-based approach to prioritize threats. This can help manage the dynamic nature of threats and ensure resources are channeled where they matter the most. Continuous improvement. CTEM is a continuous process, and organizations should regularly reevaluate and adjust their threat prioritization strategies as new threats emerge and business objectives evolve. Benefits and limitations of implementing CTEM. Benefits. Proactive risk management. CTEM allows organizations to consistently monitor, evaluate, and mitigate security risks through strategic improvement plans. Prioritization of threats. CTEM provides a systematic approach to effectively prioritize potential threats. Enhanced cyber resilience. CTEM improves an organization's ability to withstand and recover from cyber threats. Actionable insights. CTEM generates data-driven insights into cyber threats. Alignment with business objectives. CTEM ensures that security efforts and risk management plans align with the business's goals. Adaptability. The flexible and scalable nature of CTEM ensures that it can be adapted to suit the specific needs of any organization. Cost savings. CTEM can significantly reduce costs associated with security breaches by proactively identifying and mitigating threats. Limitations. Despite its benefits, there are several limitations and challenges associated with implementing the CTEM program. Integration gaps. CTEM requires a multifaceted approach within the security program, which means it must be built with a combination of technical solutions in place. This can lead to integration gaps if not properly managed, as different solutions may not work seamlessly together. Reliance on disparate solutions. Failure to adopt CTEM exposes companies to drawbacks such as reliance on disparate solutions. This can lead to inefficiencies and inconsistencies in threat management. Limited support for real-time constraints. CTEM operates within a specific time horizon, following governance, risk, and compliance mandates, and informs on shifts in long-term strategies. However, it may not fully address the real-time constraints imposed by threat detection and response activities. Resource-intensive. Implementing a CTEM program can be resource-intensive, requiring significant time and effort to continuously monitor and assess the organization's security posture. Need for continuous validation. CTEM places significant emphasis on validation, using tools like breach and attack simulation, BA, and security control validation to test the organization's defenses against simulated threats. This requires ongoing effort and resources to ensure the effectiveness of the implemented controls. Challenges in prioritizing threats. While CTEM aims to prioritize threats based on their potential impact, this can be challenging due to the dynamic nature of the threat landscape and the need to align these efforts with business objectives. Challenges of implementing CTEM. Getting non-security and security teams aligned. IT infrastructure, DevOps, and security teams often have communication gaps, which can pose a challenge when implementing CTEM. Seeing the bigger picture. A comprehensive CTEM program covers many areas, each with its own set of tools and unresolved problems. Aggregating all information to understand priorities and responsibilities can be challenging. Overcoming diagnostic overload. Each area covered in CTEM has its own tools, which yield alerts. Managing the information stemming from these alerts can be challenging. Adopting a risk-centric approach. Traditional cybersecurity measures often focus on achieving compliance. However, CTEM emphasizes understanding and managing risks specific to an organization's unique context, which requires a nuanced understanding of the business landscape. Integration of continuous monitoring tools and technologies. As organizations embrace innovations such as the Internet of Things, IoT, and cloud computing, they must adapt their CTEM frameworks to address the unique challenges posed by these technologies. Operationalizing a CTEM strategy. Implementing a CTEM strategy requires significant investments in time, budget, personnel, and technology. Key steps in implementing CTEM. Implementing CTEM involves a systematic 5-step process that helps organizations proactively manage and mitigate cybersecurity risks. Implementing CTEM is a continuous cycle, as the threat landscape is always evolving. Organizations must regularly revisit each step to adapt to new threats and changes in their digital environment. Scoping. This initial phase is about defining what needs to be protected within the organization. It involves understanding the assets, systems, and data that are critical to the business and could be potential targets for cyber threats. Discovery. In this stage, the organization actively seeks out and identifies vulnerabilities and weaknesses in the scoped assets. This includes using tools and technologies to scan for and analyze potential security issues across the organization's attack surface, which encompasses external, internal, and cloud environments. Prioritization. After discovering vulnerabilities, the next step is to prioritize them based on their potential impact on the business. This involves assessing the severity, exploitability, and the criticality of the potential impact to the business, as well as any compensating security controls. Validation. This phase is crucial for ensuring that the organization's vulnerability to threats has been accurately assessed and that the remediation operations are effective. It typically involves practices like penetration testing and red team exercises to simulate attacks and validate the protections in place. Mobilization. The final step involves operationalizing the findings from the CTEM process. This means putting in place the necessary actions to correct identified risks and ensuring that all teams within the organization are informed and aligned with the security efforts. This may include automating mitigation through integration with SIEM and SOAR platforms, as well as establishing communication standards and documented cross-team workflows. Scoping phase. The scoping phase is the initial stage in the CTEM framework. It involves defining the scope of the CTEM program, determining which systems, assets, and infrastructure segments will be included, and identifying the stakeholders who will be involved. During this stage, security teams need to understand what matters most to their business in order to define the scope. This includes identifying the key attack surfaces where vulnerabilities can be managed. The scoping process ensures accurate identification of critical and vulnerable systems, which makes it the foundational step in devising security measures. The scoping stage forms the foundation of the CTEM program and is essential to its overall success as it establishes the framework for the subsequent stages. It is crucial to include all relevant areas under the scope of CTEM, such as external attack surfaces and cloud environments, to avoid leaving any potential breach points exposed. Discovery phase. The discovery phase is the second stage in the CTEM framework. This phase involves identifying and cataloging all vulnerable resources within the organization, such as hardware, software, databases, and network infrastructure. During the discovery phase, businesses use a wide variety of IT discovery tools and methods to audit all their IT resources. This often includes conducting vulnerability assessments, penetration testing, and other security audits. The goal is to actively seek out and identify potential vulnerabilities within the organization's systems and assets. It's important to involve a diverse team of experts in the discovery stage, including IT personnel, security personnel, and other employees who may have a unique perspective on potential vulnerabilities. This ensures that all potential threats are identified and evaluated. The discovery phase serves as the bridge between the scoping and prioritization phases in the CTEM process. After the scoping phase, where the key attack surfaces and stakeholders are identified, the discovery phase focuses on the in-detail identification of all assets and vulnerabilities. Prioritization phase. The prioritization phase is the third stage in the CTEM framework. This phase is crucial as it helps organizations identify what high-value assets need to be prioritized, as not everything can be protected at once. During the prioritization phase, organizations evaluate the potential vulnerabilities identified in the discovery phase based on how likely they are to be exploited and the potential impact this would have on the organization. This involves assessing the severity, exploitability, and the criticality of the potential impact to the business, as well as any compensating security controls. The primary purpose of prioritization is to create a task list to reduce risk efficiently. This enables organizations to optimally allocate their resources, ensuring effective utilization. Prioritization helps organizations determine which assets are most critical and need the highest level of protection. The prioritization phase is an ongoing process that involves continually assessing, ranking, and selecting which assets require immediate attention. This phase is dynamic and needs to be adaptable to address evolving threats effectively. Validation phase. The validation phase is the fourth stage in the CTEM framework. This phase is crucial as it verifies the effectiveness of the organization's cybersecurity posture and the measures taken to control and decrease vulnerabilities. During the validation phase, organizations evaluate how they would handle an actual attack and assess their ability to defend against it. This involves using tools like breach and attack simulation, BA, and security control validation to test the organization's defenses against simulated threats. The validation phase ensures that the plans for addressing the vulnerabilities and threats identified in the prioritization phase are effective. This could involve adding additional safeguards, updating software, or changing security settings. It's also important to involve a wide range of stakeholders in the validation phase, including IT personnel, security personnel, and other relevant teams. This ensures that the validation process is comprehensive and that the remediation measures are effective across the organization. Mobilization phase. The mobilization phase is the final stage in the CTEM framework. This phase is about operationalizing the findings from the CTEM process and implementing the necessary actions to correct identified risks. During the mobilization phase, organizations put into action the plans for addressing the vulnerabilities and threats identified in the prioritization phase and validated in the validation phase. This could involve adding additional safeguards, updating software, or changing security settings. This phase also involves ensuring that all teams within the organization are informed and aligned with the security efforts. This may include automating mitigation through integration with security information and event management, SIEM, and security orchestration, automation, and response, SOAR, platforms, as well as establishing communication standards and documented cross-team workflows. The mobilization phase is crucial as it drives the message that remediation cannot be entirely automated and requires human intervention. It emphasizes the need for security leaders to mobilize a response and remove exposures from the environment. Other implementation things. Prioritization threats. The prioritization phase is the third stage in the CTEM framework. During this phase, organizations evaluate the potential vulnerabilities identified in the discovery phase based on how likely they are to be exploited and the potential impact this would have on the organization. Here are the key steps involved in prioritizing threats during CTEM implementation. Assess severity and likelihood. Businesses often use a risk assessment methodology to analyze the severity and likelihood of each vulnerability. This involves evaluating the potential damage that could be caused if the vulnerability were to be exploited. Consider business impact. CTEM programs help organizations prioritize threats based on their potential impact on the business. This involves considering factors such as the criticality of the affected system or data, the potential financial impact, and the potential reputational damage. Availability of compensating controls. The availability of compensating controls, which are alternative measures that can reduce the risk of a vulnerability being exploited, is also a factor in prioritization. Tolerance for residual risk. The organization's tolerance for residual risk, which is the risk that remains after all controls have been applied, is another factor that can influence prioritization. Allocate resources. Based on prioritization, organizations can effectively allocate resources towards the most significant risks. This strategic approach to threat management results in more efficient use of resources and a quicker response to the most potentially damaging threats. Prioritization methods. Here are some common methods and best practices for prioritizing threats during CTEM implementation. Business-aligned prioritization. CTEM aligns its prioritization with business objectives, focusing on the most critical threats and vulnerabilities that could impact the organization's most valuable assets. This approach ensures that resources are allocated where they matter the most, aligning the organization's efforts with the ever-changing threat landscape. Impact analysis. Prioritization should include an analysis of the potential impact of each threat. By evaluating the severity and potential damage of each threat, organizations can effectively allocate resources towards the most significant risks. Dynamic prioritization. The threat landscape is dynamic, with new vulnerabilities emerging regularly. Therefore, prioritization strategies need to be adaptable to address evolving threats effectively. Resource allocation. Human resources are finite, and security teams must prioritize their efforts. The key is to allocate resources towards impactful vulnerabilities that can significantly impact the organization. To ensure that threat prioritization is aligned with business goals, organizations should incorporate strategic business goals into their CTEM program. This approach allows organizations to evaluate the severity and damage potential of every threat, and then allocate resources accordingly, ensuring that security measures are focused on protecting the most critical business assets. Effectiveness of a CTEM program. To measure the effectiveness of a CTEM program, organizations can use several key performance indicators and metrics. By using these metrics and continuously monitoring them, organizations can gain insights into the effectiveness of their CTEM program and make informed decisions to enhance their cybersecurity posture. It's important to note that the effectiveness of a CTEM program is not static and should be evaluated regularly to adapt to the evolving threat landscape and business needs. Risk reduction. Evaluate the reduction in security risks by tracking the number of vulnerabilities identified and remediated over time. A successful CTEM program should demonstrate a downward trend in the number and severity of security risks. Improved threat detection. Measure the effectiveness of threat detection capabilities by tracking the time it takes to detect new vulnerabilities or threats. A lower mean time to detect, MTTD, indicates a more effective CTEM program. Time to remediate. Assess the speed at which identified threats and vulnerabilities are addressed. A successful CTEM program should help reduce the time between detection and remediation, known as mean time to respond, MTTR. Security control effectiveness. Use tools like security control validation and breach and attack simulation to test the organization's defenses against simulated threats. The results can validate the impact of the implemented controls and the effectiveness of the security measures in place. Compliance metrics. For industries with regulatory requirements, achieving and maintaining compliance is a key success indicator. Track compliance violations or issues to gauge the effectiveness of the CTEM program in maintaining regulatory standards. Business alignment. Ensure that the CTEM program aligns with business priorities. This can be measured qualitatively by assessing whether remediation efforts focus on protecting the most critical business assets and align with key business objectives. Stakeholder feedback. Collect and analyze feedback from stakeholders involved in the CTEM process. Positive feedback can indicate that the program is meeting its objectives and is well received by those it affects. Vulnerability density and time to remediate. Vulnerability density and time to remediate are two key metrics that can be used to measure the effectiveness of a CTEM program. Vulnerability density is a measure of the number of vulnerabilities per unit of code or system. It provides an indication of the overall security health of an organization's systems. A lower vulnerability density indicates a more secure system, while a higher vulnerability density suggests a greater potential for exploitation. To use this metric effectively, organizations should track changes in vulnerability density over time. A decreasing trend would indicate that the CTEM program is effectively identifying and remediating vulnerabilities, thereby improving the organization's security posture. It is calculated by dividing the total number of vulnerabilities by the total number of systems or applications. This metric can be used to estimate the number of residual vulnerabilities in a newly released software system given its size. A high vulnerability density indicates that there are more vulnerabilities to remediate, which could lead to a higher risk of exploitation. Organizations should aim to keep vulnerability density low to reduce the risk of exploitation. Time to remediate, also known as mean time to respond, is a measure of the average time it takes to respond to and remediate identified vulnerabilities or threats. A lower MTTR indicates efficient response and resolution, suggesting a more effective CTEM program. This metric is crucial because the longer a vulnerability remains unaddressed, the greater the chance it could be exploited by malicious actors. Therefore, a successful CTEM program should help reduce the time between detection and remediation. It is calculated by subtracting the discovery date from the remediation date. In more simple terms, MTTR is the number of days it takes to close a security vulnerability once it has been discovered. MTTR may also be calculated on a case-by-case basis or on a macro level. The macro equation for MTTR is MTTR equals total sum of detection to remediation time is divided by total number of incidents. A lower time to remediation indicates that vulnerabilities are being addressed quickly and reduces the risk of exploitation. Organizations should aim for a short time to remediation to reduce risk. Both metrics provide valuable insights into the effectiveness of a CTEM program. By continuously monitoring these metrics, organizations can identify areas for improvement and take action to enhance their security posture. Alternatives. There are alternatives to CTEM that might be better suited to certain organizations or scenarios. Open source cloud security posture management. Open source CSPM tools are cost-effective and flexible solutions for cloud security. They offer the benefits of community support and the potential for customization. However, they can be resource-intensive to deploy and may make an organization dependent on the community for updates and improvements. Vanta. Vanta is a youth esports development platform that provides expert coaching and mentorship. It has received accreditation from STEM, indicating its commitment to developing necessary skills such as innovation, teamwork, and problem-solving in the youth. Defense Surface Management. DSM provides a more efficient and effective way to connect threat intelligence data and CTEM. It helps organizations prioritize and optimize their defenses by identifying strengths and weaknesses and comparing capabilities against adversarial tactics, techniques, and procedures, TTPs. CloudBees Jenkins Enterprise and Operations Center. These tools provide more features to visualize software delivery pipelines and recover from failures. They offer greater visibility into Jenkins operations and allow for the central management of clusters of Jenkins masters, development, and performance analytics. Unifying remediation. This approach leverages automation to streamline the response to security issues, reducing manual intervention and response time. It also includes considering the context of security issues, which helps in identifying the most critical issues, understanding their root causes, and determining effective remediation strategies. Pen testing. While CTEM is focused on identifying and preventing as many vulnerabilities as possible, pen testing is a human-driven offensive test that attempts to achieve a specific goal. Using both methodologies increases visibility dramatically and provides a more comprehensive security approach. Automation in tax preparation. Automation can help eliminate the risk of human error that can occur with manual data entry, leading to more accurate financial statements. It can streamline audit processes, allowing tax professionals to identify and prioritize high-risk areas.